Je suis Grégory Pouy et vous écoutez Vlan, un podcast qui vous aide à être plus serein en comprenant avec nuance le monde dans lequel nous évoluons.
The book is called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And in my understanding, women has been raised to be nice, smiling all the time. We actually said to women, "Oh, you're not smiley enough." We never say that to men. And actually, I feel like women are even more suffering of this nice person syndrome than even guy.
That even women are?
Women are more inclined to suffer from this syndrome than men.
Okay.
For me, but maybe I'm wrong. And then we're going to talk about relationship. That's going to be another topic. But
okay, all right. We might as well cover it all. So, you know what? People will ask me, because my focus has been on men.
Right.
But my background is marriage and family therapy. I was a therapist in private practice for 25 years. So I've been working with men and women for a long time. For about the last 20 plus years, almost exclusively with men. So because that's my bread and butter. I'm just focused on that niche because I like it. But people will ask me, well, are there nice girls, right? Nice women, nice girl syndrome. And I say, actually, I think in many ways, what we now call nice guy syndrome, men, probably grew out of nice girl syndrome. And what I mean by that is that, let me kind of two pieces here. Again, let me see if I can remember both pieces, hold them, juggle them both. In No More Mr. Nice Guy, as far as I know, and even when I wrote it, as far as I knew, I was probably the first person to really address codependency in men. Now, there were books on codependency that had been written, and I read them because I realized early on I was codependent. But the word itself evolved out of addictions treatment. So you have a person who's the addict, the dependent person on a substance. So alcohol, drugs, gambling, pornography, whatever. That person gets identified as the addict. They're addicted to the substance and it's, controlling them. If they're in relationship, often the partner, as kind of they got maybe into treatment and started looking at big pictures, the system of a relationship, this person got identified as the co-addict, right? They were addicted to this person and their addiction. And so they were codependent on this person, and maybe either trying to manage their addiction, hide their alcohol, prevent them from going out and picking up prostitutes, hiding their cigarettes, or they were maybe actually even enabling their behavior. So that's where the term codependent, co-addict came from. And so that's where the word first came up, was in use of people in relationship with addicts. It seems, probably historically, a lot of the addicts were men and a lot of the co-addicts were women in relationship with them. So the term early on really was primarily often used in terms of women. So in terms of, nice girls, yeah, probably that existed long before anybody even thought to look at codependency in men. So I'd already read books, Codependency No More, Beyond Codependency, all kinds of books, Adult Children of Alcoholics. I'd read all those books, realized I was codependent. And then I started seeing the same behaviors, in other men that I was working with. As a marriage therapist, guys would come to me and say, I'm a nice guy. I treat her better than her ex. I'm raising her children. I do everything for her. I give her everything she wants. She's never happy. It's never good enough. She never wants to have sex anymore. She's mad all the time. When's it going to be my turn? I thought, I can finish her sentences for them. That's when I started realizing I wasn't the only codependent man. Other men had this, I'm nice, I do everything, and I'm resentful, and I'm not getting what I want. So I started a No More Mr. Nice Guy men's group, started another one. We met weekly. I started writing chapters. It turned into a book. Now, in writing to men, in No More Mr. Nice Guy, I consciously decided not to use the word codependent primarily because the word at that time was pretty much only used in the addiction field and towards women who love too much, that kind of thing. So I did not use the word codependency in No More Mr. Nice Guy. But what I'm talking about is codependency. Nice guy syndrome is codependency. Now, a term I like better than codependency, because I think it actually is a clearer term, is the term borrowed functioning. That a codependent, a nice guy, a nice girl, tends to get their identity in terms of how we in relationship to other. So borrowed function.
Right.
You have problems. I get my identity from helping you fix your problems. Borrowed functioning. I'm nice to you and treat you well. Therefore, you'll value me and appreciate me. Borrowed functioning. I love you so much so that you'll love me back. Borrowed functioning, rather than loving ourselves or treating ourselves well or solving our own problems, right? That would be a more healthy, just a healthy, what's a good term for it? Internal locus of control. We're managing our own world. We don't need this person to get identity, to get value, to have a borrowed functioning. So that's why codependents, when they're in codependent relationship with the other, often have a hard time separating themselves out. Their entire identity, that borrowed functioning. I only exist. I only have value. I only have purpose in regard to you, how you see me, problems you have that I can fix. And ironically, when you're a codependent is in a relationship with a person who, let's say, is the identified problem or patient, they have problems. They're an addict. They're angry. They have up and downs. They're depressed. They spend too much money. They can't be faithful. Whatever it is. And this person is trying so hard to fix their problems because that's what they do and that's what they get their value and that's their identity and that's the only way they know to be in the world is to connect to somebody who has problems that we can fix. And this could be man or woman, okay? And this could be man or woman too. This could be a friend or family member or a partner, right? A coworker. Because this person gets identity from fixing problems. And it looks like they're trying to fix this person's problems. Oh, do this, change that, stop doing that. The truth is, if this person became problem-free, this person would be out of a job. They're not needed anymore, right? With borrowed functioning, oh, where's my value? And that's why this person will often sabotage or enable this ongoing situation here. And even while we're getting mad at them because they don't take our advice and solve the problem and get better, the truth is if they got better, we would feel really anxious and out of control because they might not need us anymore, okay? So that's the borrowed function aspect. So here's the thing, and I think culturally we've had a flip-flop. I think for, let's say, centuries, eons, kind of under a more patriarchal model where kind of, the men kind of own stuff and kind of were the dominant force in culture. And women, because they bear children and raise children, we tend to think of them as more of the giving, caring, nurturing, holding everything together, gender. I think for many, many years, women were more that identified as the codependent, the borrowed functioning, dependent, giving to get, fixing. They were dependent on a partner for their very survival and well-being. So they maybe had to be nice. They had to go along to get along. They had to play that role of being the kind, smiling, caring person to get value. Still, maybe partly natural temperament, but also borrowed functioning as well. Okay, and maybe very, very culturally indoctrinated. All right, but I think we've had a switch. I was in grad school in the 1980s, and in early 1980s, so a while back, and in some of my coursework, I had probably early feminist teachers, and in child development, they were teaching back then, and now this is actually taught in the school systems to young children. They were teaching back then that gender did not exist, that children were a tabula rasa, born a blank slate, And the gender, especially gender roles, i.e., women be nice and smiling and caring, gender roles were imposed on little boys and little girls by culture. Okay. Now, while I think there's truth that gender roles often can be culturally influenced and gender can be fluid, what they were teaching was scientifically and empirically wrong and inaccurate. Children, little boys, little girls, do in general develop differently, right? They have different patterns, different language patterns, and there's a bell curve where most developing young boys would fit inside the bell curve. There might be overlap with the bell curve of girls, but they are different bell curves of how boys and girls tend to develop. And we can say all we want, children are blank slates, but they're not. They're not. Right? Science has proven that over and over and over again. So, but what happened was this idea, and the other message I got from my teachers was that while they were saying gender doesn't exist, they were basically, long before the term toxic masculine, they were saying competition is bad because boys are competitive, and that's hurtful, is abusive, it's toxic, it's just not good. And they were saying that cooperation, which they identified with female behavior, feminine behavior, as good. Cooperation is good. Now, while they're saying gender doesn't exist, they're saying the kind of the gender manifestation of boys, aggressiveness, is bad, and competition, but the cooperation of girls. So even back then, the females were defined as the cooperative gender. The go along to get along, the caring, the nurturing. You think of nurses and social workers, and you often back then thought of women, right? And so what seems to have happened is this, message that I heard in graduate school in the 80s has now proliferated, been also picked up by the gay, trans, lesbian movement, a few other movements. And kind of has been carried out in social media, projected into the school system, that now there's almost been a flip-flop. That if you look around, women are outperforming men. They are now the competitive, aggressive gender. They're getting more degrees than men. Boys and young men are dropping out of school at record rates, getting kicked out of school at record rates, committing suicide at record rates, and the girls are thriving. They're getting the degrees. They're getting the jobs. They're getting the advanced jobs. Now, the whole DEI and various laws and rules kind of give women and minorities and maybe immigrants a push in a lot of the companies, and the guys are getting squeezed out by all of that. And that's a whole nother discussion. But now what's happening is while the feminists back in the day said hierarchies are bad because men create the hierarchies, now all of a sudden women have risen into the role. They're in the hierarchies. They've competed their way into these roles. And now you see more and more men that are just passively pleasing. I call it, they're hanging out in the nursery. They're not accomplishing anything. They're not finishing school. They can play video games all day. They can surf the internet for porn all day. They can smoke dope. They can drink. They get their video pushed to them. And so you've got just generations of passively pleasing men. So I think I've seen a flip in the whole thing. Back in the day, I think it was women identified as nice girl, kind of nurturing, caring, giving. Now all of a sudden, they're the high-performing gender, and the boys that were more dominant, the male gender, all of a sudden they're underperforming, and they're now passively pleasing and going along and getting along, and not amounting to much of anything in a lot of situations.
I have this. Going back to what you're saying, I have this idea. We talk a lot about deconstruct men. We don't talk so much about deconstruct women. I honestly don't really believe in it. I think that we are both very constructed. Sorry, I have a mirror here. We are both very constructed. And so I was wondering, how does it impact man-women relationship, or maybe gay relationship somehow?
Well, we're covering everything here.
No, but I was wondering, because
and I have lots of opinions, so I'll offer them up. Here's what I see. Well, let's talk about straight culture for a minute, and then again, if I remember, we'll come back to gay culture.
Yeah.
In the straight culture, there's been this thing of like, okay, let's get rid of all gender roles. We're all the same. And so we've kind of just we've taken the bell curve and just flattened it. We're all the same. It's flat. At least that's what we've been shooting for. Maybe that wasn't the intention, but that's kind of what's happening. We're flattening out the bell curve. And what's happening, especially in heterosexual relationships, is that because the men are underperforming, they're getting more and more isolated. They're not getting degrees, they're not getting well-paying jobs. And again, there's a lot of factors that play into this. And a lot of blame gets made. And I don't like the blame game. It doesn't seem to serve. I don't like playing that victim role. But statistically, men are underperforming. They're falling through the cracks. They're falling out of the system. And as a result, and because many of them just never develop robust enough life skills, because if they got a smartphone in their hand or a computer, they can just be on a computer all day long and never have to actually learn to interact with real people. And part of that means interacting with the opposite sex. And so it means that nowadays we've got a group of men, let's just say millennials down to Generation Z, but even, was it X is above the millennials? Generation of men that are almost too socially inept to interact with women. And even with all the swipe right and all the apps and social media, guys can do the technology, but we just haven't learned the social skills to interact with women very well. And if we're underperforming, we may not have a lot to offer women in general, or at least of what women want in terms of a partner, a mate. Now, a few men, maybe develop the skill sets by watching enough YouTube videos or going to a pickup boot camp or getting on red pill forums or whatever. They maybe actually develop enough social skills that they can go out and get women. Now, what seems to be happening with those guys that get good at getting women is they don't want to settle down with one woman. If I can get women, why wouldn't I just keep getting more and more, right? Why would I settle down to one? Because I might see a younger, cuter, hotter woman over there. And if I'm with one, I can't go get that one. So you've got, I think, two categories of men out there. The ones that are either, maybe they're highly performing, but don't know how to talk to women, or underperforming and don't know how to talk to women. So really, that just take them out of the picture in terms of relationship. Right. And then you got maybe the men, whether they're high performing or not, like in the world, they're at least high performing enough to get chicks, to get women. Maybe they go to the gym a lot and they work out, they learn the skills, they can do all this stuff, juggle plates or whatever, whatever they're doing. Right. So they get good at getting women, but they're not big on settling down into a long-term relationship. Now we got the women. They're more higher performing in the world. In fact, they're performing so well. A friend of mine was telling me the other day he dated a woman who worked for Meta and in Ireland, actually. And he said that companies like Meta now are paying their women employees to freeze their eggs so that they can keep them working through this really peak productive period of their 30s and into their 40s. Oh, and you can have your babies later on. Okay. So the women, they go focus on their getting the education, getting their degrees, getting in the job place, working their way up the job ladder. They're performing at a high level. And now all of a sudden they get to be mid to late 30s and go, oh, my clock's ticking. I think it's time I think about relationship and maybe having family. Now they're high performing, they're invested in their job, they're making good money, and they look around and they don't want to get into a relationship that requires that they leave their career because they've worked hard to get into that position. And they look around and they don't want some underperforming guy that can't at least match them success-wise, financially, or a bunch of underperforming guys that can't even approach them or talk to them, right? So they do tend to want a man that at least matches their success or better. But by the time they're reaching 40, any guy that's going to match them financially or better is probably already either in relationship or not interested in a 40-year-old woman who's all of a sudden ready to start making babies and doesn't want to give up her career. You know, I heard somebody refer to them, Scott Galloway referred to them as Porsche polygamists. They have enough money and status, they don't have to go get the 40-year-old that froze her eggs. They can go get the 25-year-old, right? Now, again, is all of this good, bad? I don't know. But it seems to be happening. And even with women, they got the swipe right apps as well. So I think throw into all of this, I call the FOMO. The men, well, because with all my skills and technology, I can go get a younger, hotter woman. Why would I settle down with one? The women, FOMO, well, if I get lots of men's constant attention all the time wanting to ask me out, spend money on me, and take me cool places, why would I just pick one and give up all that attention I get from other men? So whether or not that's the cause of all this, but statistically, more and more surveys are showing that, number one, marriage is happening at a much later age for people. More and more people don't get married. Well, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it just is. More and more people report not having been in a relationship at all in the last year, 2 years. And more people, and especially young men, report not having had sex in like the last year or ever. And if anybody should be having sex, it should be 18, 19, and 20-year-old men. That's their peak of having sex. It does start actually going downhill at about 25, the drive of men. Now, you don't notice it till about 35, but it reaches its peak in mid-late 20s for men. Women tend to hit their peak late 30s and into their 40s before menopause hits. So all of a sudden, at least in the straight world, nobody's getting together and staying together. And you know, I'm reading stuff now, not only in terms of marriage rate is dropping, age of marriage going up, birth rate is dropping significantly around the world. And some people, including Elon Musk, is really concerned about that. So he keeps saying to everybody, I'll impregnate you. Get here, take my sperm, take my sperm.
Totally, 100%.
So there are economic concerns about a falling birth rate worldwide. Okay. So that's the straight world. You know, nobody's getting together, and if they are, they don't stay together. Now, and part of this is because we flatten the bell curve. It's kind of like there's no male, no female. We're all the same. You know, we all want the same, blah, blah, blah. In the gay, my experience is I live in a very gay-friendly community. Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, packed with gay men. We're part of town I used to live in. All my best friends were gay, right? Just, yeah, I got hit on a lot, but just gay. But in the gay and lesbian world, they understand polarity. They understand we're not the same. They understand you need a pitcher and a catcher. You need a top and a bottom. You need a dom and a sub. Now, in some, you can trade that on and off, but in most of those relationships, that doesn't get traded. It's pretty constant. If you're a pitcher, you know, you stay a pitcher. If you're a catcher, you stay a catcher. If you're a top, you stay a top. If you're a bottom, you stay a top. So gay lesbian relationships seem to have a lot of polarity, a lot of energy, a lot, you know, and they can attract what they want. And because to have a sexual relationship, you have to have a doer and a done too. Otherwise, you have two bodies lying next to each other waiting for something to happen. And that's kind of how most straight relationships have become. It's just two people waiting for someone to do something, take the lead. And because we've gotten rid of words like dominance and submission or leadership, because those are bad words. Well, we've called them bad. So what's happening is straight relationships have just gotten plain uninteresting. And while the gay relationships and lesbian relationships, which seem to be on the rise, you know, actually have maintained that polarity, that energy that actually keeps something happening and keeps something going. Now, again, these are just my observations, my theories, my hunches. You know, might be plenty of people say I'm full of shit, but it's just what I see going on.
But how do you, one question I had asked was, how do you define masculinity and how do you position yourself between your masculine and your feminine, or your yin and yang? How do you balance it as a man? And for me, I feel like you need both. and you can be the boat and the sea, to refer to the book you mentioned earlier. But a lot of men and women are lost in the they're lost in translation somehow.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And here's the way I look at it. And again, the way I think about it has been strongly influenced by David Data and his work and Way of the Superior Man, pretty popular book. And but I kind of have my own spin. I have my own kind of presentation application. And the way I look at it is that everybody has their yin and their yang. We have masculine, feminine energy. And I break it down really simply, and because it kind of makes it easier to apply, because this can get pretty nuanced, complex, layered. But let's say all of us, men and women, however we identify, have a masculine side and a feminine side. And the way I break it down, the masculine in us does. The feminine in us is done too. Masculine penetrates, feminine is penetrated. Now, this can be done very consciously in very positive, open-hearted, abundant ways, and it can be very unconscious and very fear-based, abusive, aggressive kind of ways. And so I'm a big fan. Like I said, I mainly work with men these days. So I'm a big fan at helping men recognize they have both feminine, masculine side, and women have feminine, masculine side, and learn to honor both and care for both, nurture both, and use both. And it's not. I'm a big fan of if we can recognize and honor both, there's a nice flow between them, right? We can activate the parts of us the most needed in any given situation, and we're very conscious they can overlap. I mean, if you take that yin and yang symbol that we often think of it, from Eastern thought, the black and white, kind of like two half moons, they're integrated. There's a flow. Now, I don't think in terms of balance. I'm not sure balance gives us the best answers in a lot of situations. A lot of nice guys will come and say, Robert, I want to get a balance of, I don't want to be a nice guy, but I don't want to be a jerk, or, I want my masculine and feminine. And I go, I've never known any really successful or happy person that was all that balanced. I think if you're actually going to make a difference in the world, usually you do it when you're kind of out of balance, but not completely ignoring the other part. There's still connection and reciprocity and a flow. So whether a man and woman, let me just kind of back up a second. And so what I see, going back to what I was talking about earlier, is we've got a lot of now passively pleasing codependent men and a lot of high performing, maybe aggressive, competitive women. So we got a lot of men living in their feminine, being, everything is pushed to them. My videos are pushed to me. I can call Uber Eats and my food gets brought to me. My porn gets pushed to me. Everything gets pushed. So you're in your feminine. It's receptive. I'm on social media getting liked and just surfing, all feminine. There's no action, no doing in that. So young men, when I talk to some guy, millennial, Generation Z, and I said, put your phone down for a while. Or maybe just say, take your social media apps off your phone. Only look at social media on a desktop. They get a deer in the headlights. They will not take social media apps off their phone. Social media is very feminizing. It doesn't motivate many people to go put a big dent in the cosmos. It's just more just doing nothing. Nothing is, when you're on social media, are you changing the world? No, you're having the world kind of pushed to you, fed to you, for good or for bad. There's good stuff there. There's a lot of shit there. So a lot of men are in that feminine being done to, pushed, right? Not accomplishing much. You got a lot of women that are in their masculine and they're doing, and even being a mother, if you think about it, even mothering is mostly masculine, is doing. The only thing about mothering that's really feminine might just be holding an infant to your breast and looking into their eyes, or maybe a child comes and gets in your lap and looks up and says, Mommy, I love you. That's feminine. Everything else, you got to feed them. You got to bathe them. You got to clothe them. You got to get them to bed in time. You got to burp them. You got to, get them to the doctor. You got to get them to school. You got to get their homework done. That's all masculine. It's all doing. And so that's why I think a lot of women actually are really disappointed in motherhood. They thought it was all just going to be one big flow of love, big love fest between them and their child. No, their child's just one big demand. And so they have to be in their masculine, right? So, and then when they go to work, just getting ready for work, they're in their masculine. Commuting to work, they're in their masculine. At work, they have to produce. They got to get shit done. They got to deal with customers, with bosses, with coworkers, with sales, with this. It's all doing. They come home, commute, another doing. They get home. There's dinner to be made. There's dishes to be done. There's laundry to be done. There's house to be cleaned. Even if they have a nanny, a pair, house cleaner, they're still masculine managing. And as David Data says in Way of the Superior Man, for woman, maybe she, naturally more feminine than is in her masculine a lot. She becomes dry and angular and often kind of bitter and crabby. And, most women probably would acknowledge they come home from a day's work and they're in their career. They're not filling a bucket full and overflowing and just ready to give to the world. They've been giving. And, they come home and it's one more thing, they got to give. And it's probably one reason why they're not getting into relationships, because they're going to have to go give after giving all day, doing all day. So I think for men or women to be happy and to perform optimally, we have to honor both the masculine and feminine. So a lot of men have to do more masculine practice to get them used to being in that I'm going to go do in this world. I think men need to get the fuck to the gym. We need to go work out. We need to go do things that challenge us. We need to get out of our comfort zone. We need to go learn to live at our edge, because we've been hanging out in the nursery and we're so passive and getting things pushed to us. A lot of women need to learn how to embrace more of their feminine side, of letting themselves be done to receive, to be open, to experience the bliss of being well penetrated by conscious masculine. But a lot of them don't trust men, can't let go, can't stop. And so they just stay in their masculine, doing all the time. And what I see for a lot of women is they turn to what I'll call the junk food feminine, and guys do this as well. And so just maybe watching a lot of Netflix, maybe drinking. When I was in the dating world 20 years ago in my 40s and 50s, I got on dating sites. Almost every woman mentioned wine in some way. Oh, I love going to wine bars, a glass of wine in the evening, going to wine country, wine this. And I thought, if men advertised how much they drank on their dating profiles, they probably wouldn't get a date. But for women, if it mentioned wine, and I think wine, chocolate, Sex and the City reruns, Kardashians, shoe shopping. I remember I was dating a woman one time. I think it was our very first date, and we were going for a walk together. And she mentioned something about her sister was going to have a shoe party at her house where women came over and tried on shoes. And I said, shoe shopping, that's women's porn. And she stopped in her tracks. We're walking. I thought, did I say something wrong? I said, I just said shoe shopping, that's women's porn. She looked at me, she goes, you get it. You understand. and she actually got turned on that I understood that for women, that was their porn, right? Shoe shopping, maybe any kind of shopping, maybe spending money. So women will often go into those junk food feminine things instead of truly relaxing, finding calm, doing some breath work, doing yoga that doesn't demand of them, getting into nature, letting their senses be filled, having a sauna. Those are things that can kind of nurture and fill us. Listening to music, having good conversation. So, I think all of us need to be more attentive to our masculine and feminine, yin and yang energies, and notice when we're getting out of balance. If we're getting too far, if a man's getting too far into his feminine, how does he need to go challenge himself? If a woman's getting too far into her masculine, how does she need to go let go and do nothing? And accept connection and the flow of love.
Actually, I to go to your point, I saw like a little scene last week in a restaurant. Very simple. I was sitting in a restaurant and the restaurant was empty, and there's a couple entering, and the woman say, "Where do you want to sit?" And the guy's like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't care. I'm easygoing. Choose." And there was a few sentences exchange, but then the woman got mad because I think that she wanted the man to decide, to take a position and to lead somehow, which is weird because the guy was nice. Like, he was like, yeah, I don't mind. You can choose.
I'll let you have your way. I'll let you choose. I'll be nice.
But she
Women
didn't
tell
react
me
well.
they hate that. Women tell me they hate that. Two quick stories around that. I dated a woman for a little bit who I actually met in America, but she lived in Germany. And I went to visit her, and we flew. She was a flight attendant, a purser, and we flew to England, and we went to London, and my first time in London, and we did a whirlwind tour of London, all the sites in like a day and a half. And we went shopping, some went to Harrods, stuff like that. And partway through the day, she stops me. She says, "I got to ask you, are you going to open my door or not?" And as a nice guy, I'm in trouble. I didn't do it right. She goes, No. Just sometimes you open the door, sometimes you don't. Tell me, are you going to open my door? I'll know. Then I'll know. And I go, I'm going to open your door. From that moment on, every woman I've ever been with, whether it's getting in and out of a car, going in and out, I'll say, wait for me. I'll open your door. I trained my mother. My mother said, well, if I was waiting for your dad to open my door, I'd still be waiting. He's been dead for 12 years. I trained my granddaughter, who used to try to beat me out of the car when she was younger. She's 18 now. Now she waits, right? My wife, my son, my stepson, he's 19. He opens the door for his mother, right? So I've only had one woman push against that in like 20 plus years. And I just said, no, I don't want to control you. I don't want to tell you what to do, but if you hang out with me, I'll open your door. She kept resisting, pushing against it. I took her salsa dancing. She let me lead her all over the floor. And then later she wanted to go home and have sex. All the while, because I kept setting the tone and leading, not trying to control her, just, I made the decisions, right? Now, I try to make decisions that empower other people and decisions that, make other people feel good. It's not just because that's what I want. And so, I've seen that situation that if the man will lead and make a decision, most women, not all, most women will go, great, thanks for making a decision. Because again, the women, if they're in their masculine all day long, making every decision and come home and got to make all the decisions for them and their partner as well, that just feels like a burden. And women tell me, I don't want to come home and have my husband say, what do you want to do tonight? Where do you want to eat? Where do you want to go? So one time, this was years ago, I taught a class at a local community college. I think it was maybe a dating class. It was a one-night class just about how to meet women. And afterwards, we went to a nice restaurant and got a bite to eat. And so there's about maybe 8 or 10 guys. And I frequented that restaurant, so I knew the waiters and waitresses. And a waitress came by.
Right.
And I said, Jessica, I got a question for you. And I said, how do you like it if you're hanging out with your boyfriend, on a date with a guy, whatever, and he leaves all the decisions up to you? He's trying to be nice. And she goes, I hate it. Took her order, turned around, walked away. I just looked at the guys and said, she told you the truth. She hates it that she's got to make all the decisions, for the guy. Now, again, do most women want us to impose their will on them? No. But they do want us at least to show up with a plan, get the ball rolling. It can be talked about from there. It can be negotiated, but don't make them start the conversation and the decision-making. Say, hey, let's go grab that table. And she says, well, can we sit closer to the window? Yeah, sure, why not? You can go sit by the window, but at least somebody, say, hey, let's go grab that table. And again, a lot of this is men don't want to upset the woman. We want to be nice. We want them to give it their way. We want them to be happy. We want them to have sex with us later on. So, we're doing everything to try to please them, which actually tends to kill any sex drive that the woman's thinking, no, this guy can penetrate me well. They're not thinking that. They're thinking, this guy can't even fucking make a decision about the table or where we're going to go eat. How's he going to penetrate me well if we get home later on in bed? Right? So they want to know we can penetrate the universe and do it consciously and masterfully. And then they go, maybe I'll let him penetrate me. But if they don't see us penetrating the universe masterfully, they don't want us sticking our parts in their parts. They're not going to open to that.
And that's very interesting the way you describe it, because it's a very nuanced way. It doesn't mean to impose anything, but just to take the lead and then being open. And I kind of like that, because I used to be on the other side of the spectrum. So I used to be this very nice guy and not understanding why some women didn't like it somehow because I was like, oh, I'm being nice. I'm being so easygoing.
Nice. Why don't you appreciate me? Why, I'm different than all the bad men I heard you complain about that were controlling assholes.
Exactly.
You complain about the controlling assholes. I'm being a nice guy, letting you decide. But how come you want to go be with the controlling asshole that you complain about, but not me, the nice guy? Yeah,
that's a very, very good point. Thank you so much, Robert. It's so interesting.
We've covered a lot of stuff, haven't we?
I think we could continue for an hour. To be honest, I have a lot of questions, but I'm respecting your time. I'm also respecting the time of the people listening to us. The last question of the podcast is the podcast name Passionnant. So it's an onomatopoeia to slam the door to something. I'd like to know, what do you want to open the door to or to slam the door to?
You know, you asked me that before we got started, and often I'm pretty good at answering questions, but you know what I would like to open the door to is maybe what the discussion in feminism actually began as, and that is every person having the freedom to be exactly who they are, to show up in the world just as they are.
Right.
Unfortunately, some of that message has gone to, oh no, you can't show up the way you are because I think that's bad, right? So what I'd like to open the door is, if we're not hurting anybody, that we can open the door and be exactly who we are and live our life exactly the way that feels right to us and have that be validated and supported rather than being told somehow we're bad or we're evil. So that's what I would open the door.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you, Gregory. This was a lot of fun.
That was so interesting. Thank you so much.
Ce podcast a été monté et mixé par le studio Plink, qui accompagne Vlan depuis ses débuts. Donc si vous avez besoin de vous faire accompagner par de vrais professionnels sur toutes les étapes de votre podcast de marque, de l'idée en passant par l'enregistrement, qu'il soit audio ou vidéo, le montage, le mixage et la diffusion, n'hésitez pas à faire un tour sur leur site web. C'est plink.studio, plink.studio. Merci d'avoir écouté Vlan. Si vous avez aimé l'émission, n'hésitez pas à mettre des étoiles sur vos plateformes de podcast préférées. Vous pouvez aussi partager l'épisode sur vos réseaux sociaux, Instagram Stories, Facebook, LinkedIn, où vous voulez. Je suis Grégory Pouy. Vous pouvez me retrouver sur l'intégralité des plateformes sous le nom Greg from Paris. Si vous avez des idées pour des invités, si vous avez des commentaires, n'hésitez surtout pas à m'envoyer un message. Allez, merci et à bientôt.